This is the story of 1952. There was one British physician. He saw two infants who had pancytopenia, hepatosplenomegaly, and elevated ferritin level in blood. And as we generally do in pancytopenia, we send bone marrow biopsy for pathological reporting. And in that case, in both cases, in those two infants, pathologist reported that they saw macrophage eating blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And there were multiple macrophages eating those blood cells they saw under microscope. So you will say it's normal, macrophage eats blood cells. Yeah, macrophage eat our blood cells when it retires. Like every cell has its life, and when it is completed, when it is dysfunctional, macrophage eats and clears them. But it does not normally eat healthy red blood cells, healthy white blood cells, healthy platelets who are young cells, right? And when you do bone marrow biopsy of mine in any other individual who is healthy, you won't see so many macrophages eating these blood cells. If there are so many macrophages eating blood cells, it means macrophage is mad, right? And in that case, in those two infants, both infants died, because at that time there was no such diagnosis of these types of syndrome like pancytopenia, hepatosplenomegaly, ferritin elevation, and macrophage eating blood cells. So he published his experience in one journal. I don't remember what was the journal, and as he saw that syndrome in both infants, so he thought it might be some familial related, genetics related. So he commented like that in that journal. And later many physicians found similar picture, not only related to genetics but also in some infections like histoplasma infection, COVID infections, Epstein-Barr virus infections, so viral, bacterial, fungal. In these types of infections, they found similar picture: pancytopenia, elevated ferritin, hepatosplenomegaly, and macrophage eating blood cells. So they later called it hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. Hemophagocytosis means phagocytes eating blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. And lymphohistiocytosis means lymphocytes and histiocytes are increased. So macrophage is overactivated and increased in number, increased in activity. So they called it HLH, hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. So when we get any infections like let's say histoplasma case, because I had seen one histoplasma case who had HLH. So when there is that entry of histoplasma in the blood, what happens that macrophage tries to eat histoplasma to clear it, right? T cells get activated, T cells activate macrophage, macrophage then activates T cells, and in this way they try to clear the histoplasma from the blood, from our system. But when it is disseminating, Like in our case, that case was newly diagnosed HIV/AIDS, and CD4 count was very low, like less than 20, like that. So when it tries to disseminate, then immune system gets overactivated to kill that histoplasma, to contain that histoplasma. And in that case, that's why macrophage becomes mad and it tries to eat other blood cells, other cells except histoplasma. Apart from histoplasma, they also eat red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So this is a state of cytokine storm syndrome, where there is hyperinflammatory state and overactivation of macrophage, overactivation of T cells. So in this syndrome, why ferritin increases? Because ferritin is a storage form of iron. So if you can store iron, these bacteria, these fungi can get deprived of this iron. That's why body tries to store iron in ferritin form rather than free iron form. And due to these cytokines also, ferritin elevates because there is massive cytokine release, and this cytokine also suppress natural killer cell. NK cell is one type of immune cell in our body, and it tries to control the inflammation, tries to control the hyperinflammatory state of T cell. But due to this overactivation of cytokines, NK cell activity gets suppressed and T cell activity gets accelerated, macrophage activity gets accelerated. So when you see NK cell activity in this condition, you will find low NK cell activity. And you know, interleukin 2 receptor is present on T cell. To activate T cell, it gets signal with interleukin 2 receptor, and when there is hyperactivation, then what happens, that there are many interleukin 2 receptors on T cell surfaces, and some parts which are soluble gets mixed with the blood, and you can detect that soluble interleukin 2 receptor. You can test that. If it is elevated, you see in high titer, you can guess that it is hyperinflammatory state. So this is also one of the criteria that we use to tell that whether it is HLH or not. Like we use ferritin, we use NK cell activity, we use triglycerides, right? So why triglycerides get elevated? Because lipoprotein lipase activity gets shut down. It's suppressed due to that hyperinflammatory state. That's why triglycerides gets elevated.